Jesus came to Jericho, and he was passing through the city. And this would have taken some time. Apart from Jerusalem, Jericho is the largest city that Jesus enters into in any of the Gospels. Jericho sprawled over a large area, including the old city inside the legendary walls, as well as some new surrounding districts that had been constructed by Herod the Great. The city had been built overlooking one of the most important trade routes in the ancient world. Many people who lived there had done very well for themselves off of the trade. And there was also, of course, an army of tax collectors who were there to make sure that a lot of money got collected for the Roman Empire as well. And this wealthy elite was supported by a multitude of slaves and poor laborers who kept the city running on a day-by-day basis. Jesus was well known by this point. As far as we can tell, he had not been to Jericho before, but surely his reputation preceded him. Accounts of his incredible preaching, his storytelling, the miraculous healings that broke out wherever he went had spread far and wide. Even more astounding, people were saying that that very morning, as he approached the city, Jesus had healed a blind beggar by the side of the road. It was said that the man could now see perfectly, and that he had joined in the crowd of disciples that followed in Jesus' wake. As you can imagine, therefore, that as Jesus passed through the gates and into the old city, huge crowds turned out, all trying to get a glimpse of this phenomenon. Everyone was there, rich and poor, slave and free. And Jesus could have chosen to single out anyone in that crowd. He could have healed this one of his affliction. He could have offered good news to that one who struggled in her poverty. And yeah, there were a lot more than a few comfortable, wealthy people who had turned out, and Jesus would have well been able to put them in their places with a few choice words about camels and needles' eyes. But Jesus doesn't seem to have done any of those things. Instead, we're told that among that vast crowd, Jesus' eye fell on one figure in particular. And Jesus decided that this was the one person out of all the people in Jericho that he needed to spend some time with. Why him? Why, out of all of those people, did Jesus choose Zacchaeus? Most Christians know a few things about Zacchaeus. The main thing they know about him is that he was short. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. But Jesus mentions nothing about Zacchaeus' stature. His height is actually only mentioned in passing in the story itself. And I am sure that a lot of people down through the centuries who have been disrespected or even mistreated because they were small or because their bodies did not fit somebody's ideal standards in some other way, have taken comfort from the fact that Jesus noticed Zacchaeus. If you've ever felt like that, you should take comfort in that knowledge. Jesus did notice a short person. But that's not the thing I want to focus on today. I think there's something else going on in this story as well. What about the fact that Zacchaeus was a tax collector? As someone who collaborated with the occupying foreign government, Zacchaeus would have been hated and despised by everybody. He was a social outcast. And we know that Jesus had a big heart that opened wide for outcasts and outsiders. So perhaps Jesus recognized Zacchaeus as an outsider, and that was why he insisted on inviting himself to Zacchaeus' house. If you've ever been made to feel like an outsider, you should take comfort in that notion as well. But I think there's also another reason, and the one that I would like to explore today. I believe that there was one thing above all else that made Jesus want to engage with Zacchaeus, something that marked him as different from everyone else. See, the crowd was full of people who were trying to connect with Jesus in some way. Some were greeting him, giving him high fives, cheering him. Others were certainly looking for things from him, some healing, some word of wisdom. And there were no doubt also those who had shown up because they had taken offense to what they'd heard about Jesus. They were calling out their insults, disputing his teachings. So everyone there was trying to get a piece of Jesus. But amid all of that noise, all of those conflicting reactions, there was one figure who was different. He was balancing precariously on the branch of a sycamore tree, peering out between the leafy branches. It's kind of remarkable that Jesus could see him at all. He was well hidden. That's what stood out about Zacchaeus in that moment. He was not there to engage. He had withdrawn to the fringes of the crowd because he was there merely to observe. Oh, he'd been curious enough to want to come out and see Jesus, but he was not looking to attract Jesus' attention. And he wanted to. He probably could have. Given his short stature, he probably could have slipped pretty easily to the front of the crowd, like the way the children make their way to the curb as the parade goes by. No one would have complained that Zacchaeus was blocking their view, but he didn't do that. He chose to withdraw. He chose to find a vantage that allowed him to see everything, but not to be seen. Zacchaeus was there as a voyeur. He was an intentional spectator of the most important thing that had ever happened in Jericho, or at least since another guy named Joshua had come to town. And if you don't get that reference, what I mean is that the name Jesus is actually a Greek translation of the Hebrew name Joshua. So there are actually two stories in the Bible about the time that a guy named Joshua came to Jericho. So that's what I suspect was the thing about Zacchaeus that caught Jesus' attention. The fact that he didn't want to be seen. He didn't want anything from Jesus. And so Jesus, perhaps to Zacchaeus' initial frustration, decided that this was the guy he needed to engage. Christian faith can very easily become a spectator sport. When you think about it, it's not that surprising. I mean, we set our churches up like theaters with, admittedly, less comfortable seating, but we point the pews all in the same direction. It gives a not very subtle message to anyone who enters the space. You are here to watch. You're here to spectate. And yes, some Christian traditions are more interactive. In black churches, the congregation is expected to call back to the preacher. In Pentecostal churches, the congregation joins in the prayers with ecstatic speech and reaction. But those things would probably make us feel kind of uncomfortable if they happened in our churches. Many churches have fallen into the habit of thinking of the worship service as a show that you go to see. And the churches that are seen as successful, it turns out, just happen to be the ones that put on the best shows. With the bands and the special effects and the talk show style messages. I understand the allure. We live in a consumer society. And so we tend to think that anything that's going to enhance our lives has to be something that we consume. If you want to improve your health, you purchase a retreat at a wellness spa. If you want some wisdom, you buy a book or you pay for a seminar. It's hardly surprising that we tend to approach spirituality in the same way. When we want to encounter God, we go out and watch a worship service. Let's call it spectator spirituality. And spectator spirituality is safe. You can listen to the message or the songs and just choose to take away what you will. A bit of comfort or encouragement, some wisdom that you may need. And then you can go home and just go on with your life and not worry about changing anything. Not really. But Jesus has a little problem with that. And when Jesus sees Zacchaeus spectating, he doesn't leave him alone. "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down," he cries, "for I must stay at your house today." And notice that Jesus doesn't just want to talk. Nor does he ask Zacchaeus to do anything specific. No, what he asks for is a sleepover. "I got to stay at your house tonight." What he asks for is an invitation to Zacchaeus' table. He's asking for the most intimate kind of social contact that took place in that world. And that's because Jesus doesn't merely want you to hear the message. He doesn't want you just to be a spectator. He isn't even asking you to study his words only to seek to apply them in some way. Jesus is seeking to connect with you on that intimate level. Jesus wants a sleepover. Jesus wants you to invite him to your table. And why? Why does Jesus want that? Because Jesus is seeking your transformation. He's not simply interested in shaming Zacchaeus over what he has done wrong, because Jesus knows that shame only produces bad feelings. It doesn't produce transformation. And Jesus isn't merely looking for Zacchaeus to donate some of his extraordinary wealth that he obtained through his shady business dealings. He is looking to transform Zacchaeus. Jesus is looking to transform you as well. And that's exactly what Zacchaeus was trying to prevent, isn't it? That's why he was hiding in the leafy branches. That's why he chose to spectate rather than engage. He wanted to be in control of what he did with what he observed of Jesus. And Zacchaeus was right to be wary. Because what happens when Jesus comes for the sleepover? At some point during the night, or I don't know, maybe it was over Fruit Loops at breakfast, Zacchaeus looks up at Jesus and says, Look, half my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. And let us understand what that is. Those are not just the words of someone who recognizes that he did a few bad things and wants to try harder. No. This is not a promise to make amends for some evil that he's done with a few flashy donations. No. This is Zacchaeus recognizing that he has been living in a way that is not honoring to God. And he's realizing that he no longer wants to live that way. These are the words of a man transformed. You're all here today because you've heard, haven't you? Jesus is passing through this town. Jesus is here. He's present in our gathering today. He promised he would be. And you're curious. You're here because you're curious, as you should be. And you're here because you're looking for a word that might give you some comfort, healing, or encouragement. And you should look for that. Jesus offers that. But I encourage you not to settle for those things. Where are you in your quest for Jesus? And for what Jesus can really offer you today? What are you holding back? Are you up there in that sycamore tree, peering through that screen of leaves because there are some things in your life you don't want to let Jesus see? You don't want to let Jesus get his hands on. What are the attitudes, the riches, the grudges, the bitternesses, the identities that you are not willing to let Jesus handle? The story of Zacchaeus is a reminder that if you are merely spectating in the Christian faith, Jesus sees you. Sees you in that tree. He knows you're there. He knows why you're holding back. But the good news is that Jesus is reaching out to invite himself in. Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. Lord Jesus, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Amen.